We're going to start the show off with Adam
For more than 200 years, our democracy has been distinguished by the peaceful transfer of power. When an American raises their right hand and takes the presidential oath of office, they are transformed from an ordinary citizen into the most powerful person in the world.
Welcome to GAMcast for June the 21st, 2022. Getting to you a little later than I wanted, but we had to live stream the January 6 hearings, and I had a bunch of work to do before that, so I just could not get to doing the podcast until now. Anyway, it is a beautiful sunny. I have not been outside, but I'm sure it is hot and humid in Atlanta. We got a lot of news to catch up with on today. We're going to talk about a Supreme Court decision. Probably won't get to that till the end, but it's important. It's good news. You'll like it. We're going to talk about what's going on in Paris and in Canada, or I should say France. You'll want to hear about that. It's also important. We're going to talk about Juneteenth because something struck me over the weekend. I didn't get to it yesterday. I should have. And we're going to talk over the January 6 hearing. So let's get back to Shifty Schiff and his little speech now. You just heard him say that you're magically transformed into the most powerful person in the world. And I wanted to stop right there because it's important, because it demonstrates one of the great disagreements between those of us that believe in the Constitution and believe in the rule of law and people like Schiff who clearly do not. People that willfully will, and again, he presided over the impeachments. He's one of the persons here. He has no problem conducting quote-unquote investigations in secrecy. We don't do that in America. He has no problems conducting a trial where he won't even show us the evidence. I say this all the time. They gathered a bunch of evidence. Let's say they have 1 million different pieces of evidence, be it audio, be it video, be it testimony, be it affidavits, be it documents, whatever. Let's say they all add up to 1 million. They shouldn't do it in secret. Okay, but we'll let that go. Once they're done, give us all, just publish the 1 million pieces, and then, okay, we'll watch your trial, but then we can go dig. No. We're only going to give you what you see. And then they alter stuff, they bring it up. I mean, it's just a joke. And to hear these people, I say this all the time, there are a bunch of things Democrats don't believe in. They don't believe in elections, they don't believe in reality, in the Constitution. If you hear them revering the Constitution, they're lying. Now, what's so significant about what he just said there? Now, we all used to think, and I used to think, well, when they say the most powerful person in the world, they're just stating kind of a fact. I mean, it is a very powerful position to have. But it's become eerie. I've watched them under Obama and now the way they attack Trump, and then now that Biden's there. They really do believe that. They believe you become some kind of a king. And so a lot of what's going on here is confession by projection. They believe that Trump was acting like a king because that's what they would have done if they'd gotten it. And I've thought about this a lot. I haven't said it yet, but I'm going to say it now. I have no doubt that if the roles were reversed, they would have done the exact same thing that Trump was trying to do to challenge the certification, as they had done in 2005. As I told you, Democrats challenged W's certification. And in all likelihood, the vice president probably would have gone along with it. I mean, who knows what would have happened there? A lot of this stuff is speculation. But anyway, let's listen to a little bit more of Schiff, and then I'm going to give you up to speed on basically a quick breakdown of what happened today, and then we're going to get on to the other news of the day, because frankly, there's not a lot of it unless you know where to look. And unfortunately, the media is just setting everything aside, for this witch hunt committee. But anyway, here's more of Schiff.
President. This is an awesome power to acquire. It is even more awesome when it is handed on peacefully. When George Washington relinquished the office of the presidency, it set a precedent that served as a beacon for other nations struggling against tyranny. When Ronald Reagan described it as a kind of miracle in the eyes of the world, he was exactly right. Other countries use violence to seize and hold power, but not in the United States, not in America. When Donald Trump used the power of the presidency to try to stay in office after losing the election to Joe Biden, he broke that sacred and centuries-old covenant.
Okay, now that's just nonsense, folks. And again, I've broken it down many times. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see some videos. We've talked about this. I mean, the House has decided the election no less than 3 times, right? 1876, 1824, 1800 elections all got tossed to the House, and they decided in various different ways. The other thing is that, one of the things the committee tried to do today, and they say these things, and they don't actually happen. So, all right, let's see, was power transferred peacefully on January 20th? In fact, it was. In fact, Biden went to the White House, took power, and apparently Trump had actually left him a very nice note, if those of you who remember and follow him closely, right? So what are you talking about, Schiff? So he made some phone calls. So he came up with things to challenge it legally under the Electoral Count Act of 1887, all legal. And he's trying to say there was no peaceful transfer. He continues.
Whether his actions were criminal will ultimately be for others to decide. But what he did was, without a doubt, unconstitutional.
That's nonsense. Nonsense. It's not unconstitutional. And again, if you go to our YouTube page or you go to our Substack page, we've got it all breaking down. No, let's look for no, Trump didn't commit a crime. We've actually got 2 videos. If you go to the video we put up on Sunday at our YouTube page, it has a different title, but it covers the same, just in a different angle of the same thing. So this is just rank propaganda. And this was, again, one of the things, the hearing today was not very good because these idiots, and I'm sorry to say that, but they are, okay, they get up there, and you know, Schiff isn't without talent. It's just, dude, if it's feces, it's feces. I don't care if you put whipped cream on it, you put a cherry on it. Like, you can't make something out of nothing, Schiff. There was the peaceful transfer of power. I know you want to say there wasn't. He's going to talk later about violence. I don't know if we'll get to it. I may move on, but he does. There was no violence. The only person that died on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt, one of Trump's supporters, right? Anybody else that died of unrelated things. That's the truth. And today they spent a lot of time in the hearing going, these people were threatened, they got violent, they got threats of violence, and some of these people talked very convincingly about getting awful tweets and these situations they would be in. But in fact, here we are, a year and a half later, no one was subjected to violence as a result of the election. Nobody. And they didn't bring anybody forward. And as per usual, they didn't bring any of the different evidence out. Let me see the tweet. Let me see the phone call. You know, don't just tell me about it. I mean, anyway, he continues.
Unpatriotic, and it was fundamentally un-American. And when he used the power of his presidency to put the enormous pressure on state, local, and local elections officials and his own vice president, it became downright dangerous. On January 6th, that pressure became deadly.
Okay, now that's a lie they tell a lot. There you go. I mean, the only person that died on January 6th as a result of the rally was Ashley Babbitt. Now, other people died from other things unrelated. That's been debunked many times. But again, Schiff and these people, they just can't help themselves. They keep coming back to this. And this is another thing they did that they continue to do. They do these idiotic openings. So Thompson and Cheney, this is the 4th time they've done it. So at this point, I think we're going to see it throughout the hearings. They get up there, they make opening statements. Now, thankfully, they've learned, and they're making them shorter. They really shouldn't do that. And then the first person who does the questioning, today it was Schiff, they make an opening. Then they get to the witnesses, and then each of these 3 morons makes closings. And again, we're listening to Schiff's closing at the end of the hearing.
Freeman said the president is supposed to protect every American, not target them. And she is right. If the most powerful person in the world can bring the full weight of the presidency down on an ordinary citizen who is merely doing her job with a lie as big and heavy as a mountain, who among us is safe?
Well, again, you haven't told us who was unsafe. You haven't told anybody violence. Apparently, he had this mountain of pressure he brought upon people. He didn't get anybody to crack, folks, quote unquote, if you believe them. Right, so just more of that nonsense. It wasn't very effective. Another thing that they had a habit of doing. Let me see if I want to play this or do I want to go through the witnesses. Let me go through the witnesses, and then I'll probably finish it off with this. So the witnesses today and what you learned today, they basically tried to do a little bit of a 2-step. The first step was they talked about the pressure that Trump put on officials to try and change from Biden to Trump. Now, what we all know, and again, I think it was very ineffective because what came across today, and again, when you've got a show trial and there's nobody to counter you, you should be able to do this flawlessly. If they gave me the power to do this, believe me, you would have come across believing today that Trump did this. But because they don't know what they're doing, they messed up. So several times they talked about Trump calling different officials and saying, hey, you know, we won this by a lot, there's a lot of fraud. And the officials would go, hey, where's the evidence? So one of the persons who testified to this many times was the Speaker of the Arizona House, a Republican, a guy named Rusty Bowers. And several times Bowers testified today that Trump would say that, And he would say, where's the evidence? And Trump would go to Jenna Ellis or Rudy Giuliani and say, give him the evidence. Get this man what he needs, right? So it demonstrated that Trump had an innocent state of mind. But otherwise, they just kept going on and saying Trump to do this, and then they never came up with the evidence, okay? And then, so later, that was the idea that Trump is pressuring people to do something. But we all know the fact of the matter is that this is all happening pretty fast. Like the election is November 3rd, I believe. And then, pretty quickly, you've got a situation where it took them about a week to certify Biden the winner. Now you're around November 10th, right? Then you got a few weeks, and nobody has really had a chance to really look into the stuff. It happens pretty quickly. And you saw Trump come along, and he's going to these officials, and he's trying to get people to look. So throughout the hearing today, you saw two things: that Trump believed everything he said. Now, they claim it's a lie, but then all they really have is Trump saying, this happened, this happened, this happened. And at best, they've got a few people going, Mr. President, that's been debunked. Okay, what about this? Then every time he's asked, every phone call he made, he consistently said, there was fraud, I was cheated, I need you to do this and this and this to correct it. They haven't so far gotten anyone to say, Trump knew it was wrong when he said it. Now, you'll recall from day 3, right, that Greg Jacob, Vice President Pence's legal staff, he literally said, Eastman told me even he didn't believe that we were following the rule. That's different. They so far weren't able to do that with Trump today, okay? So that's the big takeaway. The second witnesses were Rafflesberger out of Georgia and his assistant, Gabrielle Sterling. They both are conflicted witnesses, and again, the committee did what it does a lot, and I've said a lot. They get out ahead of their skis. They're not very effective. So it came across that Roethlisberger and Sterling were, at least seemed of the honest belief that there was not widespread fraud that could be proven that would overturn the results of the election. I will concede they seemed to testify to that. What they also did, and did very effectively, they also came across as people who were conflicted because they were asked, hey, Rafflesberger, did you do a good job? Yes, in fact, I did a great job, right? Did you really look in to see if there was any voter fraud? Oh, I did a great job doing that too, right? And then the other thing, especially with respect to Sterling, what was demonstrated was that he was angry at Trump. They played video after video after video where Gabrielle Sterling, the assistant to Brett Rafflesberger, went out and said, Trump, you've got to stop this. We've done this, and we've looked at this, and there's no fraud, and we're getting death threats and all this stuff. And at one point, he almost looked like he had PTSD. And so, again, what they don't seem to understand because they never step outside their bubble is you're impeaching your own witness, and he clearly doesn't seem to like Trump. And so it's not surprising that he's come here. And both of them, there was no talk about a subpoena. So apparently they came there willingly. But they also played the Rafflesberger phone call. They didn't seem to get very far with that because, again, throughout the call, Trump says, I beat him by 400,000. There's fraud here, fraud here, fraud here. It's close. I only need 10,000. How hard can it be? So anybody with an objective, reasonable state of mind comes across going, Trump really believes there was a lot of fraud, and he thinks there was so much fraud that only needing 11,000 or 12,000 votes, as the case may be, is not a hard hurdle. And they weren't able to effectively deliver that because it's not deliverable, folks. That's simply why. Getting back to Arizona, what they were trying to show there, and they only focused on Arizona, which I thought was odd, but they did a pretty effective job of saying the alternate slate of electors that Arizona sent was not the official group, and the ones that did it didn't do it following the law. Now, they didn't really, again, bring the receipts. They didn't show the evidence of it being criminal. These people haven't been indicted. I mean, they keep saying they're fake electors. No, they're alternate electors. And what they are intended to show, at least what I understand from Trump's team, is that, hey, there's a difference of opinion as to who the proper electors are. Therefore, Pence, you need to send it back, or therefore we need to have a debate about this. And I think they just were trying to show it. Again, I'm trying to put the best light on it for Trump. I don't know, because, again, the January 6th committee didn't give me the evidence. So, anyway, but they basically, again, didn't do a very effective job of that either. So, actually, their last witness was probably one of the most effective witnesses, and that was Shay Moss. So, Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, her mother, were the witnesses that apparently were at State Farm Arena, counting for Fulton County that night. And they were the witnesses that were allegedly seen after the poll watchers, Democrats and Republicans, went home. Again, they never cover this, and they didn't do a very good job today. It is undisputed that, in fact, the poll watchers went home. Everybody was under the impression, for some reason, that counting was done for the night. Now, Rafflesberger and maybe Sterling both, but I think it was Sterling actually testified to this, his assistant. They basically testified, no, when we were told they were leaving, we told them to go back. Okay, all right, that explains why people thought we were stopped counting, and some people in the counting continued, including from the quote-unquote suitcases, which now the claim is that these suitcases were actually official ballot holders owned by Fulton County. Okay, fine. All right, but again, they never explained why the poll watchers went home. So that to me, that's a problem, because a lot of this started because of that. Anyway, so then they claimed that, okay, well, we investigated because they had film. And again, they step in their own, you figure out what I'm talking about. But they step in it again when they say, oh, we'd had problems with Fulton County before, so we had a monitor there. And the monitor went over and said they only counted like 8,600 votes. Now, that wasn't very powerful testimony to me, because you can look at those, whatever those things are. It looks like they're holding a lot more than 8,600 ballots to me. But whatever, who knows, who cares? And the other thing, again, consistent with the January 6th committee, they talk about a video that we've never seen. They didn't show us the video where it was clear that these suitcases, in fact, tonight, you didn't even see the video of the whatever these things are being pulled out under the table. So anyway, but Shay Moss herself, the witness herself, she did a pretty good job of testifying. She started out kind of slow, but as she got comfortable, she basically testified, I thought, very effectively about why she was a poll counter, why she worked for the elections department of Fulton County, and what she was trying to do, and how this all kind of disrupted her life when she was told that she had done something wrong and she hadn't done it. Anyway, so, and then during her testimony, they played a little bit from her mother. And so I'm getting ready to play this. If you're on YouTube, you can see it. If you're listening, this is going to be Ruby Freeman. This is her mother. Now, folks, I want to try to explain this is why there was so much there to pick from today. And I really just, we've only got 40 minutes and we got to get through this stuff. So, if you want to watch it, I did a live cast. Go to our YouTube channel. It's the latest video up there. You can watch all 3.5 hours of it to your content. But Ruby Freeman, they showed a video. Now, I want to explain this to you, how it works in court. So you can show deposition testimony. You can introduce, there's lots of ways you can do it. If you've got a video of deposition testimony, you can actually play under certain circumstances, which I'm going to explain. If the witness is unavailable, you can, okay? And if the witness is unavailable for the court, either because they're beyond the court jurisdiction, because they've died since the time they gave the testimony, if they're in the hospital, yada, yada, yada. There's lots of ways you can say, court, the witness isn't here. I can't get them here either through jurisdiction or the fact that they're dead or whatever. And so I'd like to play, or I'd like to introduce the deposition. And then lots of ways you can do that. If you've got a videotape, that's A+. You just play the videotape, press play. If you don't have a videotape, you can just publish the transcript to the jury. Believe it or not, folks, if you want to, you can have somebody come in and explain to the jury, hey, jury, this is the great American male pretending to be the witness reading this transcript. And I'm going to pretend to be the lawyer at the point, or if you were the lawyer, you can do it. And I'm going to read the questions. And that person, you understand that person is just acting this out. You can literally do that. I've done it many a times. It's actually, if you don't have video, right, it's the second best way to do it. Anyway, lots of different ways you can do it. But you have to understand, the witness has to be unavailable. So just to show you how corrupt this committee is, they literally, I kid you not, in the hearing today, while Shay Moss was talking, she said, oh, your mother's here with you. And she turned around and said, yes, that's my mother with me here today. She was literally at the hearing. No, there wasn't a witness that was unavailable at all. No. We're just going to play the video. I mean, that is so highly irregular. This video, unless this person is unavailable, is rank hearsay. No court would let it in. Then you're not going to be able to see it if you're listening. But if you're listening at home on the podcast, when I press play and she starts, I want you to understand she's sitting in a room and she is reading a written statement. In fact, you may hear the papers shuffle. Now, so this isn't even testimony, folks. This is a written statement from somebody. If you didn't think this was a show trial by now, then I can't convince you allowing this type of stuff. Again, I didn't think it was very effective, but here's Ruby Freeman talking about what happened to her after the whole January, or the election of Fulton County in 2020. Take a listen.
My name is Ruby Freeman. I've always believed that when God says that he'll make your name great, but this is not the way it was supposed to be. I could have never imagined the events that followed the presidential election 2020. For my entire professional life, I was Lady Ruby. My community in Georgia, where I was born and lived my whole life, knew me as Lady Ruby. I built my own business around that name, La Ruby's Unique Treasures. a pop-up shop catering to ladies with unique fashions. I wore a shirt that proudly proclaimed that I was, and I am, Lady Ruby. Actually, I had that shirt on. I had that shirt in every color. I wore that shirt on Election Day 2020. I haven't worn it since, and I'll never wear it again. Now I won't even introduce myself by my name anymore.
All right, I'm going to play a little bit more of it. But again, this is another witness that they brought forward, and they brought forward several today. Some of them testifying like Bowers and Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, right? Rafflesberger, Gabrielle, Sterling, and others. And then some they brought through clips and whatnot. I've not seen one single solitary story of anybody being hurt. And I'm gratified by that. I don't want anybody to be hurt. No, nobody wants violence, folks. Nobody. Okay? But again, going on and on and on with this stuff. And again, nothing happened. She's saying it. I stand corrected. She's not saying it. She's reading it, but she hasn't brought any evidence. She hadn't brought any receipts either. She continues.
I get nervous when I bump into someone I know in the grocery store who says my name. I'm worried about who's listening. I get nervous when I have to give my name for food orders. I'm always concerned of who's around me. I've lost my name, and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people, starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani.
All right, we're going to stop it there. I've had enough of this. But I just wanted to get to that one point. That's another tell, folks, just in case. And I don't know if you remember this or not. I learned this the hard way when somebody literally, not physically, but verbally attacked and thrashed me when this person was saying 45 and was saying the Muslim ban. And I was like, I don't know, because this was right after the election of 2016. And I was thinking, again, folks, you know how into politics I am. And I was like, 45? Who? What? Do you mean the travel? And before I knew it, they were all over me, right? But 45, obviously Trump was the 45th president of the United States. But that right there, that's somebody, these people that believe, I hate him so much, right, that I can't even call him by his name. I'm just going to call him 45. Now, the reason I bring this up, one, to tell you where she is. Now, unfortunately, because we're getting a cross-examination here, she's reading a statement. She's not even speaking this, folks. But what I'd want to know is, when did you start calling him 45? I'd be willing to bet you it was before election 2020. But unfortunately, we can't do that. So anyway, you're basically all up to speed on what the committee did today. Again, sort of a shoddy job, not very effective. But at the end of the day, because it's a show trial and because America, for some reason, is letting them do it, it actually was pretty effective. But for the rest of us, while they're doing that, and again, this is all they care about. Again, I told you, I don't have cable, so the only time I see it is I go to the gym. I went to the gym over the weekend, and that's all they're talking about. And they basically, after I did my live stream of the January 6th hearing today, I got on the Twitter for a little bit to see what was going on, and everybody, all the lefties, they're all just taking all the bits and they're broadcasting them, and it's all like they're in love with this, folks. They're not even trying to be solemn about it, right? They're all in love with this. Well, while they're in love with this stuff and they're having a show trial, right, which I hope anyone would see through, real things are going on. So here's Corinne Diversity Hire, okay, the token, black person in the Biden administration that we got to have now. Here's her talking about whether or not we're in a recession, something that actually does impact your life.
The president said last week that there's no inevitability around a recession, but there is a greater deal of market concern about exactly that. And I know that inflation is your number one concern, but can you talk a little bit about if you're doing anything at all to prevent a recession or a rise in unemployment?
So the way that we see this, and you've heard us talk about this, that we're in a moment of transition. We have seen
transition
we
into
are
a
in
recession.
A unique situation with our with the historical gains with our economy. The way that we see it is unemployment rate has held steady at 3.6, which is also near historic lows. Business investment remains strong. Household balance sheets remain strong. There was an analysis that came out recently that showed middle class Americans had an additional $10,000 in savings then before the pandemic. Another analysis found that all income groups had higher checking account balances at the end of March than they had pre-pandemic. So we see that the strengths that our economic strength that we have seen from this past year, from the action that the president has taken with the American.
Okay, look, I'm going to stop her from sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher, but folks, we elected this. And again, while the Democrats have no idea how badly they're going to do in November, I mean, we shall see. I mean, I hope it will be the shellacking it ought to be. And I think if they continue down this road, I think they could and should keep the Senate in normal circumstances. But you keep talking like this, folks. I don't know what planet they're living on, but it ain't our planet. So anyway, we shall see. But while just want you to know, the Biden administration thinks everything's just fine. Okay. And by the way, if the quarter that's going to be reported here shortly comes in with negative growth, we are officially in a recession. We shall see. Well, also a story, I didn't cover it yesterday, but I almost did. But I had it in the bullpen to cover today. So this is a guy named Amir Adaran. He's a professor. He's in Canada. I believe he's a Canadian professor. And he's just a full-on rabid partisan, just full lefty. But anyway, he tweeted out there, "Hey, United, why are you breaking the law? Masks are required on all flights out of Canada. Your flight attendant isn't wearing one. This is United Airlines 3737 in Ottawa right now." And so he puts on at this person, at that person, a bunch of other global things. So anyway, it went viral because when he basically outed this person for not wearing a mask, a lot of people went after him and he defended himself. And I'll give the guy credit. I mean, he didn't delete the tweet. But the reason I think this is an important story, I understand it's Canada that still has the mask thing, right? But I want you to understand where we are. After all we've seen and all we've learned, you still have people out there that believes that these cloth masks work. Where you have the FDA has approved and the CDC has approved a vaccine for babies, children under 6 all the way to 6 months. I mean, folks, we talk about where we've been and where we're headed. I mean, think about that. There are still people out there that believe in these cloth masks and want us wearing these masks. I mean, how could you still be at this point? And folks, there's a lot of reasons why that's important. One is where we are, where we're headed, right? We're not headed in the right direction. But I want you to understand, folks, when you look at Europe, and I consider Canada, I know it's not technically Europe, but it's got the European culture. Folks, we're, several degrees more free and more rational to them, but they're right before us. That's our future, right? They still have people convinced by all this nonsense. And you don't think you're losing your freedom. Let me give you another story. So this is the story I mentioned earlier. European heat wave. Outdoor events in parts of France are banned, okay? Outdoor public events have been banned in an area of France as a record-breaking heat wave sweeps across Europe. Concerts and large public gatherings have been called off in Gironde department around Bordeaux. On Thursday, parts of France hit 40 degrees Celsius earlier in the year than ever before, with temperatures expected to peak on Saturday. Blah, 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 blah. You know what this is, folks? This is lockdowns for a heat wave. You're now told you cannot go outside and have a concert in a heat wave. By the way, I, like you, I'm on the British/American system. 40 degrees Celsius is 104. Okay, now I'm looking at the map, by the way, and this is another thing they do. If you look at the map and you're following us on Twitter, you can see it. I see one place in Bordeaux hitting 40. Everyone else, like Paris, is 39. Frankfurt is 37. Bern is 35. I mean, it's a lot of different things there. We don't know how long it hit that, but folks, this is the kind of stuff I watch for, because if you don't beat this back immediately, it becomes what you are. And so just be aware. They started with lockdowns for admittedly a 100-year virus. Doesn't happen all the time, but they get that. And then instead of going back and go, oh, yeah, that wasn't such a good idea. It messed up the economy. It caused inflation. Now people are suffering and yada, yada. They don't do that. Now they've learned they can lock you down. It's just a matter of what? Let me try the heat. See if you lock down for the heat. Next thing you know, you'll be locking down for the cold. God only knows what we'll be locking down from to keep this up. So anyway, the other thing I noticed, and I'm not really sure why this clicked on me, but I talked yesterday about Juneteenth. So you know me, I'm all in favor of holidays that guarantee you a long weekend. So we love Dr. King Day because it's always on a Monday. We love Juneteenth because it's on a Monday. Well, I just always thought that somehow or another, and I don't know why I thought this, but Juneteenth kind of popped up out of nowhere. I mean, it had been talked about for a while, and then you had the whole St. George Floyd thing, and the next thing you know, we got to have another holiday, and Juneteenth became it, and I was like, again, I don't really know why we need another holiday, but whatever. I mean, fine, long day weekend's great. Well, I always thought Juneteenth meant the date upon which some people that had actually been freed were freed, but they didn't know that because the soldiers had to come and tell them about the freedom. I always assumed that they didn't realize that they were made free after the end of the Civil War. Well, that's not really what happened. And I'm going to break that down in a moment. But before I do, I mentioned yesterday, or maybe I tweeted about it yesterday, I'm not sure. But, I was okay with the holiday. But now that I see the way they're going to use it, right, and they're going to use it as an excuse to talk about race again. Always with the race. And that bothers me, but I could sort of live with that if we were going to have a rational conversation about race. But we're not. We're going to have a story where we're going to be told America is evil and we're going to be lied to. So let's start with the Vice President of the United States and what she had to say about Juneteenth. And then I'm going to tell you something about history that Juneteenth is wrong about, absolutely wrong about, and disturbingly wrong about. And then I'm going to show you how this is yet another trick to convince Americans that we're all evil and we need to vote for the Democrat Party. Take a listen to Kamala Harris.
On Juneteenth, we celebrate the fulfillment of emancipation, the proclamation that all people held as slaves shall henceforth be forever free. It returned to them what was taken from them, the freedom that was theirs by birth and by right, autonomy over their own body and their own life, the promise of liberty and independence. In doing so, our nation defined freedom in opposition to slavery of Black people in America. It was a step toward making real the ideals set forth at the founding of our nation, that we are all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, when I heard the Vice President say that, there are a couple of mistakes in there, I thought. She's not right about it. Now, look, Vice President Kamala Harris making a mistake, I mean, that's no big deal. I figured she'd make mistakes. She's talking about the proclamation, but the proclamation was in the middle of the war. Proclamation didn't free those people. Not at all. It was the 13th Amendment. If you listen to Great American Mail, you know, right? There are 3 Civil War amendments. The 13th ended slavery. The 14th gave everyone the rights and privileges, immunities, and citizenships. And the 15th, which gave Black people the right to vote. Before women, by the way. White women, and I mean that. All women, by the way, but especially white women. Again, Black men get rights before white women. Just throwing that out there for the sake of the argument, just so you know, truth. Anyway, so the proclamation didn't do that. And so I went to look at it, and I thought, well, Dome can't be that crazy. I mean, she's not that wrong. Well, it turns out she's right. So here we go, right here. It is right here from the History Channel, left-wing source. Juneteenth, short for June 19th, marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people be freed. That's after the war, of course. The troops' arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth honors the end of slavery in the United States and is considered the longest-running African-American holiday. That's not true. On June 17th, 2021, it officially became a federal holiday. Now, why would they lie to us about that? So let's pull up the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, right? That's what ended slavery. And that's when I looked it up, and I said, there can't be. There's no way, because the war ended in April 1865. Apparently, it took them till June to get down to Tejas and tell those people about the war ending. Now, for all practical purposes, they might have freed them. I don't dispute that. That may be the case. But I'm looking right here at the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. If you're on you're on YouTube, you are too. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof of the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or in any place subject to their jurisdiction. All right? Right. It was passed by Congress January 31, 1865, ratified December 6, 1865. So how could these people be freed on June 19th, 1865? They couldn't have been. Now, what was the Emancipation Proclamation, folks? The Emancipation Proclamation was a stunt by Abraham Lincoln, right? He kept wanting to keep the Union together by any means he could. And so finally what he did is a stunt. He said, all right, I tell you what, you get me a victory, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to free the slaves. Well, he can't free the slaves. Only an amendment can do that. which the 13th Amendment did, but it didn't do it until much later. But the Emancipation Proclamation is even more so. And look, folks, if y'all been listening to the podcast, or and a lot of you been here from the beginning, you know that I love President Lincoln. Huge fan of President Lincoln. I mean, one of the greatest Americans to ever live. But this was a cheap political ploy. If you read the Emancipation Proclamation, it basically says, those slaves in states that shall be in rebellion after this date are henceforth free. Now, he can't do that, but what about the slaves in states that weren't in rebellion, like Kentucky, like Maryland? They weren't freed. So here they are lying to us with this Juneteenth stuff about that. It's just not true. Now, it's a nice little story. It's fine. But let's getting back to the truth. Why are they doing that? Well, let's go back to the History Channel. 5 myths about slavery. Myth number 1, there were enslaved Irish people in the in American colonies. And you'll notice Kamala there a couple times said black people, black people. They keep going after us to convince us that only blacks were slaves in America. That is not true. Not even close to true. Part B, I guarantee you, in 5 to 10 years, they will have most of Americans convinced that slavery only existed in America, even though slavery existed throughout every single solitary culture on God's green earth. And B, that only black people were slaves, even though every single solitary race of people have been slaves in world history. But anyway, getting to this. A historian and public librarian, Liam Hogan, wrote, there is unanimous agreement based on the overwhelming evidence that the Irish were never subjected to perpetual hereditary slavery in the colonies based on the notions of, quote, race. The enduring myth of Irish slavery, which most often surfaces today in the service of Irish nationalists and white supremacist causes, has roots in the 17th and 18th centuries when Irish laborers were derogatorily called white slaves. The phrase would later be employed as propaganda by the slave-owning South against the industrialized North, along with false claims that life was far harder as an immigrant factory workers than they were for enslaved people. What is the truth? Large numbers of indentured servants did indeed immigrate from Ireland to the British colonies of North America, where they were provided a cheap labor for planters and merchants eager to exploit it. The most across the Atlantic willingly. Anyway, long story short, I got to move on. But they go on to talk about the idea that, yeah, they were slaves, but they weren't the same as slaves that were black people, and they were able to get their freedom a little bit more. That may be true, but it doesn't change the fact that all sorts of people were slaves. And again, they're just focusing on one group, the Irish. What about other people that were slaves, other white groups of people like Italians and others? You notice they don't focus on that. Because, again, it's all part of what they do to a lot of people. Myth number 2, the South seceded from the Union over the issue of states' rights, not slavery. Now, again, folks, I've gone over this many times before historically in my own, and I've read a lot of the books and things on the Civil War. I'm not trying to bring up a huge debate here, but I can tell you very simply this. All right? I'm going to tell you what Abraham Lincoln said at the Gettysburg Address, because that's one of the sources I would go to if I want to know what it was about. But here's the point. It was either both about states' rights and slavery, or it was about one or the other. But we're not, you can sit there, it's kind of an opinion as to precisely what it was about, but they're not willing to do that. What they want to do is you're to believe it was only about slavery. I'm not going to read the bunk they have here. And they have a couple other myths, but this is what they do. Right? They start with a holiday, and then eventually they try to use propaganda to convince you of things that aren't true. So let's get to President Lincoln. I'm reading from the Gettysburg Address right here. It was November 19th, 1863. It was after the Battle of Gettysburg. All right, and this is the end of it. I won't read the whole thing. If I read the whole thing, I'll start crying. This thing just makes me choke up. But anyway, I'm reading the last sentence of the third paragraph from the Gettysburg Address. This is the very end of it. Let me go back a little bit. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. They died for it, okay? That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. That's the end of slavery, right? And that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. According to Abraham Lincoln, he believed that it was two things, right? The end of slavery, right? So we fought over slavery for sure. And we also fought over the idea, government of the people, by the people, for the people. That was important to him. And that's, right, that's the whole, the reverse of states' rights. And they absolutely were over states' rights. To wit, if you'd have told them they couldn't keep the slaves anymore, they would have kept the states and the government and the power. Anyway, last story, and it's a good one. The Supreme Court today released the case of Carson versus Macon. They basically found 6-3 with the conservatives on the right side of the Constitution that if a state has a program where they give money to schools, they cannot discriminate against religious schools. That is absolutely the right answer to that. And again, given the way the public school system is failing us, any idea that you should be able to withhold money from schools that are otherwise good schools just because they have a religious affiliation is nonsense. So that's a little bit of good news out there. Hopefully that will spread, and we'll start to see more good results from the Supreme Court. There were some other cases that came down today, but I don't have time to get to it today. We'll get to them tomorrow. You are now all caught up on the news of the day, and if you liked the podcast, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.